7.12 Test Disaster Recovery Plan. Alright, we're building on a lot of stuff here that we've already covered, so we know a lot of these concepts should feel familiar. And again, if I don't go deep enough in anything that you need, use the prompt at the end to sharpen and go as deep as you need. This task has 6 subtasks that include the different test types as well as communications. So 1, the read-through or tabletop exercise. 2, walkthroughs. 3, simulations. 4, parallel testing. 5, full interruption testing. And 6, communications. Each of these testing methods helps ensure that your organization is prepared for real disasters and plays a unique role in building a resilient recovery strategy. These concepts overlap a lot with the ISO guideline 27031 and the auditable standard ISO 22301, which focus on business continuity, as well as NIST 834, which outlines contingency planning. So understanding this task in a holistic way will really help, and I would use these at the end when you do your test prompt and say, how does this compare to the terminologies used in ISO or NIST? That'll really help. 7.12.1 Read-through and tabletop exercises. Here they're combined, but in my experience most people separate them a little bit. A read-through exercise is all key stakeholders review the disaster recovery and business continuity plan to ensure they're familiar with their roles and responsibilities. This exercise is all about understanding the plan and identifying any gaps in documentation or processes without disrupting the systems. The tabletop portion adds a layer of simulation by walking through a hypothetical disaster scenario. It allows stakeholders to discuss how they would respond, what decisions need to be made, and how coordination between different teams would work. This method fosters collaboration and ensures communication strategies are sound, all without involving any actual system changes. Now this test type ties in with ISO 22301 and 27031, which emphasize the importance of involving all stakeholders in business continuity exercises. The read-through tabletop exercises ensure that everyone understands the plan, which is essential for compliance and readiness. 7.12.2 Walkthrough. A more structured form of testing than the read-through or tabletop. In this exercise, participants walk through each step of the disaster recovery plan in detail, but still without activating any systems. The goal here is to ensure that each team member fully understands their responsibilities and can identify potential issues before a real disaster occurs. The walkthrough is also useful for verifying that necessary resources such as personnel, equipment, and communication tools are available and accessible. One key benefit about walkthroughs is that they often uncover gaps that a read-through might miss. For example, certain procedures may look good on paper, but when walked through you might find certain roles overlap, or perhaps a critical piece of equipment isn't readily available. And this also ties directly to 22301 as well as 27031, which emphasize structured step-by-step approaches to testing and validating business continuity and disaster recovery plans. 7.12.3 Simulation. This is where things get a bit more real. In simulation, you're actually testing the disaster recovery plan in a controlled environment. Unlike the read-through or walkthrough, simulations involve activating some actual systems and procedures outlined in the plan, but it's in an isolated environment that mirrors production. The primary purpose of a simulation is to ensure that the disaster recovery processes work as intended. This includes activating backup systems, running failover procedures, and validating that everything can be recovered as expected. Simulations help you understand not only whether the plan works in theory, but also in practice, and it's a great way to validate both the technical aspects of the plan and the coordination between teams under pressure. These tests are essential for ensuring that any gaps in your disaster recovery capabilities are addressed before a real disaster strikes. 7.12.4 Parallel testing. This type of test is even closer to reality than simulations because you're running recovery operations alongside live production systems. The key here is that you are conducting tests while the primary environment remains fully operational. This allows you to evaluate your recovery site functions without taking your main system offline. The goal is to verify the recovery processes can be executed without disruption to business, but there is an important caution here. We aim for no impact to production systems, but the risk is higher than simulation. Parallel testing involves live environments, so any mistakes or unforeseen issues could potentially affect production systems. This is why careful planning and execution is very critical during a parallel test. But during the test, performance metrics from the alternate site are compared to those from the primary site, helping to ensure that the recovery site can handle the load and meet the service level agreements in the event of a disaster. This is a great way to validate the readiness of the alternate site, but always remember, the inherent risk is higher than in isolated environments. 7.12.5 Full interruption. This method involves completely shutting down the primary production systems and requiring the organization to fully execute its disaster recovery plan as if a real disaster has actually occurred. This type of test is quite rare, and for a good reason. It's extremely disruptive. Full interruption testing is typically only used by organizations with the highest security and availability requirements, such as government agencies and financial institutions. By taking your production environment completely offline, you test every aspect of your recovery plan, including data restoration, system failover, and alternate facility activation. The value of the full interruption test is that it gives you the most realistic assessment of your recovery capabilities. If your plan works as expected, you have confidence that your organization can recover from a total system failure. However, the risk is very high running these tests, so that's why it's important to plan every detail meticulously. Any gaps or failures during this test can have real consequences for any organization. 7.12.6 Communications, which is often overlooked but absolutely critical to the success of any disaster recovery test. This subtask focuses on how to communicate with stakeholders, regulators, and internal teams during the execution of a disaster recovery test. A clear and effective communication plan should be in place before any test begins. This plan needs to outline who is responsible for communicating test progress, key milestones, and any issues that arise during the test. Regular status updates should be provided to all relevant parties, including executive leadership and external regulators if required. This keeps everyone informed and ensures that there are no surprises during or after the test. It's also important to ensure that communications comply with regulatory requirements, especially when dealing with external stakeholders and regulatory bodies. For example, financial institutions have stringent rules about disaster recovery testing, and ensuring those rules are followed is essential for maintaining compliance. Post-test briefings are another key component of communication. After the test is complete, it's vital to share the results with all stakeholders, discuss lessons learned, and outline the steps needed to improve the plan based on the test results. All right, quickly summarizing, we talked about the various test types, read-through or tabletop exercises to help familiarize stakeholders with the plan, walkthrough that ensures all procedures are understood and ready to be executed, simulation tests the disaster recovery plan in a controlled non-production environment, parallel testing runs operations at the alternate site with some risk of potentially disrupting production, and full interruption completely shuts down production and fully tests the recovery capabilities. And we talked about communications that ensures all stakeholders are informed throughout the testing process. CISSPs are expected to understand these methods aren't isolated, they're interconnected and should be used together to ensure that your disaster recovery plan is robust as possible and align with standards such as ISO IEC 27031, ISO 22301, and NIST SP 834, which I'm going to recommend you take all of these and put them in the prompt on the next slide. Yeah, make sure you really feel comfortable with this, especially with terminologies. Not everybody uses the same term everywhere. So when you get in a test type, well, tell me more about how they walk through. What is a structured walkthrough? Some people say that's the same as the tabletop and stuff like that. Play around with these things and get smarter and smarter. All right. See you in the next one, 713.